Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
It is Wednesday, July 3rd. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. I'm going to start the show by saying it gives me no pleasure to say this, but I believe now today more than ever that come Election Day in November, President Joseph Robinette Biden will not be the Democratic Party nominee. I don't know how the mechanics are going to work. I can't sit here and predict for you how that works out. There are all sorts of issues to work out. Tens of millions, if not more than 100 million or so in campaign dollars in the Biden-Harris coffers. How does that wind up in whoever the nominee's going to be? How does it wind up in their coffers? I think if it's Vice President Harris, it's much easier. I believe anyway, but I'm no Federal Elections Committee person. I couldn't tell you how that operates. How that nominee's name winds up on the ballot of all 50 states and U.S. territories, it's all very much up in the air. How that works out at the convention, no clue whatsoever. But I believe today, now more than ever, that we're starting to see and hear a sea change within the Democratic Party for there to be a change at the top of the ticket. And I think, honestly, what sealed it isn't so much what anybody else said, but more what President Joe Biden himself said last night. Reporters are reporting now that in fact, I'm reading from ABC News, that at a campaign fundraiser in McLean, Virginia last night, President Biden, for the first time, attributed his poor debate performance to the amount of foreign travel he did in June, according to notes from a small group of reporters permitted in the event. Remember, after the debate, he had a cold, we were told. We weren't told that beforehand, but we were told that after the fact. And you could hear the raspiness in his voice. There had to be some reason for that. That is obviously not how he sounded the next day or in subsequent public appearances when he gave his statement Monday night at the White House after the Supreme Court decision. That's not how he sounded. So, okay, sure, the cold. Could be. Last night in McLean, Virginia, at this fundraiser, he said, I decided to travel around the world a couple of times, including, by the way, the trip to the D-Day commemoration in France, the 80th anniversary. He said, I didn't listen to my staff, and said that he came back and nearly fell asleep on stage. Probably joking. I'm sure it was for laughs. It's not the thing to say, not the time to say it. He continued, it's not an excuse, but an explanation, and added that the DNC and the Biden campaign have raised millions of dollars since debate night. Like, that's supposed to be reassuring. He did say, I feel good about it. The problem is most Americans don't. In fact, as of late last week after the debate, most Democrats don't. A new CNN SSRS poll released just last night showed that after the debate, amongst those polled between June 28th through 30th, all Americans believe that the Democratic Party ticket has a better chance with someone else by a 75 to 25 margin. Within the Democratic Party, these are Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents registered to vote. 56% say that they believe the Democratic Party has a better chance with someone else. I'll get to comments. Andrea Mitchell had them lined up yesterday. She had Nancy Pelosi on. She had Jim Clyburn on, both of whom, in my opinion and statements, provided hints of cracks in the dam. But the first legitimate crack came from, that's terrible, right? Came from Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who has become the first elected federal Democrat to call for President Biden to withdraw from the race. Here he is yesterday with Anderson Cooper on CNN.
So to your fellow Democrats who are continuing to say, look, this was one bad night, you say what?
Well, I say that we needed a great night. We got a great disappointment instead. Whether there are some physical problems there, I don't know. I think rather than some tests here or there, what I'd like to see is the president out actively engaging with journalists like you, answering the tough questions, demonstrating that he doesn't need a teleprompter. But I think the setback that has occurred will be difficult to overcome under any circumstance. We're looking at not people like me who believe Joe Biden has accomplished a great deal for our country, but a very small portion of the country who are undecided, who may be what are called the double haters that don't like either candidate. And I think we would be better off if we had a new candidate who could present a new vision for our country. And we can do that if we have an open and fair democratic process over the next few weeks.
How that works, I have no idea. I do have to say this. When we go back to President Biden's statement last night at the fundraiser in McLean, Virginia, he blamed international travel. And he's not wrong. In the month of June, he did travel extensively. Twice to Europe, actually, June 5th through the 9th, obviously for the D-Day commemoration. The debate was on the 27th. That's 16 days after his trip to Normandy. Okay, that being said, he did go to Fasano, Italy, where he attended the G7 summit. That was June 12th through 14th. Now, you could argue, why did you come back on the 9th to just turn around and go back on the 12th? Still, though, the 12th or the 14th is nearly 2 weeks before this crucial debate that the campaign went through all sorts of stops and measures to challenge former President Donald Trump to be at. Remember when Joe Biden released the video, the social media call out to former President Trump? Do you remember this? Let me find this.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
I mean, that was cute. That was a cute quip because of, his court proceedings at the time. It ain't so cute now. We're not feeling too cute about it, are we? So let's go back to the president's travel schedule. Again, he went to Normandy, June 5th through 9th. For some reason, came back stateside for a few days and then left on the 12th through the 14th for the G7 summit. One might argue the mistake made was maybe staying in Europe instead of whirlwinding back and time changes and all that stuff. Came back from Italy, went to California, came to Virginia June 18th, chilled out at the beach for the weekend, and then went to Camp David for about 7 days. Listen, travel is tough on the body. You don't have to tell me. And I'm 50 years old. I need a day or two when I travel, especially if I change time zones. I need a day or two to kind of recalibrate. I get it. I don't know that I need 7. And I don't take the excuse. I'm just going to say it's an excuse. I don't take the travel excuse as something valid. Any more than I can say at this point that my initial reaction to, he had a cold. I didn't take that too kindly either because nobody warned us. Nobody said that was the case. Nobody reported that. You hear reporters break stories all the time. Let's behind the curtain a little bit when it comes to the world of journalism. They break stories because somebody tells them. Information is leaked. A lot of times reporters are played like that. Little information gets out on purpose. By the way, I don't know if you know, but the president's been battling a cold for a day or two. Nobody broke that story prior to the debate. Nobody. Congressman Nikema Williams, my congresswoman, who, by the way, has been invited to the show. She's been on the show once before. She's been invited in recent days, as a matter of fact. Have not heard back from her office. And maybe now I know why. Speaking of purposeful leaks, was this a purposeful leak? She claims it was. I'm not so sure. the AJC Politically Georgia podcast, folks, breaking the story that an email went out, circulated through Georgia Democratic Party officials, not to be jumping on media requests. The AJC reporting that a key part of the National Democratic strategy to contain the damage over President Joe Biden's poor performance last week in Atlanta involves discouraging dissent from within the party. It's a strategy state Democrats are embracing too. On Monday, Democratic Party of Georgia aides sent a mass email to officials urging them to think twice about panning Biden and directing them to talk to party communication staff if they're contacted by the media. The letter states, as we have relayed to you all, not every press opportunity is a good one or a helpful one. While reporters are typically friendly, they talk to people for a living, they should not be considered friends, and they can't write something you don't say. The AJC Politically Georgia writers quip helpfully the email telling officials not to talk to the press ended up with, you guessed it, the press. Greg Bluestein at the AJC actually tweeting a screenshot of this email. The email reads, Dear Georgia Democrats, on behalf of Chair Congresswoman Nikema Williams, please see the important guidance attached and listed below. As we have relayed to you all, not every press opportunity is a good one or a helpful one. While reporters are typically friendly, they talk to people for a living. They should not be considered friends, and they can't write something you don't say. If you are contacted by the media, your first step, in bold, all caps, first step, should be to reach out to DPG communication staff. Contact info for Dave and Ellie are listed below. Do not speak to the media unless and until you have spoken to Dave or Ellie. I don't know who Dave or Ellie are. I do know that it's not easy reaching out to and hearing back from the DPG about any interview request. I had no experience with, Anyway, Greg shared that screen grab and tweets, some Georgia Democrats got this email today encouraging them to be cautious about doing media interviews. The note includes talking points urging them to close ranks around President Biden. Nikema Williams retweeted Greg Bluestein's tweet, writing, my grandma taught me, if you stay ready, you'll be ready. Georgia Democrats are ready to defeat Trump in November. And then she adds Bluestein, not sure why this tweet was worthy, ? We can discuss this and more about Georgia Democrats' support for Joe Biden when I join you on Politically Georgia in the morning. And she did join them yesterday. We'll have what sounds like some friendly but contentious audio from that conversation. And we'll get to some of the Andrea Mitchell audio as well. She's speaking with Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn. Some cracks in the dam around President Joe Biden and his continuance to be atop the ticket for the Democratic Party heading into November. All that and more when The Ron Show returns here in minutes on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast. I meant to mention, by the way, and I'll share it in today's show notes at RonShowATL.com, a former Congresswoman from Georgia, Carolyn Bourdeaux, wrote an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that speaks to the dangers of a Trump presidency 2.0 and also has many questions about President Joe Biden's fitness, not necessarily just to defeat Donald Trump, but also to serve another 4 years. Not only will I share that in the show notes at RonShowATL.com, we will read that for you in its entirety with some, of course, commentary sprinkled in, because that's what I do. Yesterday, my Congresswoman, Representative Nikema Williams, who again has been invited on the show again after the debate to speak to the party's support, as we still see it so far mostly solid, for President Joe Biden atop the ticket. She was on the Politically Georgia podcast yesterday and came in hot.
Congresswoman, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Greg.
I know you have a lot to say, so we're going to get right into
Greg.
it.
Let's get to it.
You're like a coiled spring ready to go. But let's get right to it, because President Biden, he had a goal during that debate. We talked about it. You talked about it. His goal was to show he was capable of serving another 4 years in office and counter Donald Trump. Even he admits he was off his game, and polls show a significant number of voters don't think he's fit to serve another term. So where does the Democratic Party go now, Congresswoman?
So, Greg, in that email that you thought you were leaking, but spoiler alert, the world needs to know this. There is one clear path forward, and that is to defeat Donald Trump. And that's what Georgia Democrats stand ready to do. That was always the plan. That is the plan. That is the adapted plan. That's what we're going to do, defeat Donald Trump, because especially after yesterday's Supreme Court ruling by a court that's been stacked by Donald Trump, we understand the stakes in this election. Your AJC editorial board, if you bury on page A14, after that front page above the fold article, will tell you that Donald Trump needs to be defeated. And that is the clear plan. We have two choices. It is a binary choice. We have Donald Trump, who lied for 90 minutes on the debate stage. Count them. You can go over and over and over. He even took credit for something my senator did, Senator Warnock, in reducing the cost of insulin. This man does not care how many lies he told because there is no fact checking in real time.
I would argue that that's President Joe Biden's job since he was on the dais and had the microphone.
And no, my president did not do a great job. Like, we all saw that with our own eyes. I'll be the first person to always shoot it to you straight. I'm going to tell you the truth. My president didn't do a great job on Thursday night, but what he has done is a damn good job as president over the last 3.5 years. And if you look at the policies and what's at stake in this election, the choice is very clear. We must elect Joe Biden and defeat Donald Trump in November.
And then Patricia Murphy comes in and I think tries to ask a question delicately, but in a way that is valid. Voters have concerns about the president's health, his well-being, his ability to handle the job. We just heard last night the president talk about the travel schedule being too taxing for him. Well, that lends to voter concern. Anyway, hear the question as it was posed, and then count how many times Representative Williams says, Patricia. This felt really tense.
Congresswoman, you say that President Biden didn't do a great job. From voters that we talked to, it was more than that. And they are concerned about him, concerned about his health, concerned about his abilities right now. I think after that debate, those seem like fair concerns, and people are simply looking for assurances that that was an anomaly and that the president is fully capable at all times, not most of the time, not 6 hours a day, but at all times, of not just being a strong candidate, but being a capable president. Can you give those assurances to voters who saw the debate Thursday night?
So the best the best predictor of future work is what you've done in your past. If you look at what Donald Trump has done, 34 felony convictions. Voters are concerned about that, Patricia. If you looked at what Donald Trump has done, calling for people to be deported, voters are concerned about that, Patricia. If you look at Donald Trump's racist past, voters are especially concerned about that, Patricia. Over and over again, Donald Trump has shown us who he is, and we must believe him. And the voters that I'm talking to, they're very concerned about Donald Trump. And I wish the AJC would have led with those concerns, because voters have been concerned for 4 years.
I understand those concerns, and I agree with you. I talked to plenty of Georgians who are worried about Donald Trump. They don't feel good that he's a convicted felon. They are very concerned about what they saw during the 2020 election here in Georgia, across the state, especially in Fulton County. But my question was about President Biden. Do you feel like
at all times, at the top of the show, that
at all times is he capable of doing the job? At all times.
I have bad days, and I'm nowhere near 81 years old or however old both of the old people are that are running for president. I have bad days. You have bad days. We all have off moments. But what I know is over the past 3.5 years, when President Joe Biden has stepped up to lead this country, he has led at every measure and beats Donald Trump by leaps and bounds.
Representative Williams then takes a friendly swipe, I believe, at Greg Bluestein for his ability to leak her email that she says she actually wanted people to see.
The AJC editorial board is separate and independent from the newsroom, and we didn't even know about that editorial until shortly before it came out, so we didn't have anything to do with it.
You should have leaked that like you were leaking my emails, Greg.
I had not seen it yet, trust me.
Bluestein's able to recover and gets on task asking about the getting on the same page email that Nikema Williams sent out to other state officials, and Carolyn Bordeaux's op-ed as well.
You mentioned, I tweeted last night, and I put it in the morning newsletter this morning, an email that went out to Democratic officials saying, hey, let's all get on, I'm paraphrasing here, but hey, let's all get on the same page.
Let's not paraphrase though, use my words, because I didn't say let's all get on the same page.
Yes.
My text message, because I have a Signal group with these same people, and the screenshot ministry is real, so they'll probably share this too. But my text message said, let's talk about the path forward. Spoiler alert, it is to defeat Donald Trump.
And part of it was also, and now I am pulling it up, as we have relayed to you all, not every press opportunity is a good one or a helpful one. While reporters are typically friendly, they talk to people for a living, they should not be considered friends, and they can't write something you don't say. This is not controversial.
Where's the lie?
No, this is not controversial at all. To me, at least, it shows an effort to get everyone on the same page to sort of limit some of that. There's only been a few Democrats who have been in Georgia who have been willing to say publicly anything negative about President Biden. Plenty of them are saying things privately. We've all heard it in our text chains and in our text messages. I'm going to read you one, though, Congresswoman, and this is a quote. Biden does not have the mental or physical stamina for 4 more years of one of the most demanding jobs on earth. It's no one's fault, and it's not fair, but life isn't fair, and the best path forward is an intentional and organized process to select another Democratic nominee to beat Trump. Congresswoman, that wasn't from a pundit or a donor. That was written by former Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux, your colleague. So when you hear something like that...
Oh, Carolyn.
Yeah, it's the old Carolyn rejoinder. Anyway, I'll give you more of that response and Carolyn Bourdeaux's op-ed when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio.
This is the Ron Show on America One Radio.
Second half of the Wednesday Ron Show, July 3rd it is. And you heard me lead the show with my belief that I think now more than ever, it's pretty clear that Democrats are starting to get their minds around the notion that Joe Biden would not be the nominee. I think yesterday was sort of a critical turning point. I think his statement last night at a fundraiser where he blamed his whirlwind travel in the first half of the month of June on his performance on the 27th of June, nearly 2 weeks after his second trip to Europe. And listen, easy for me to say, right? Oh, we should be able to turn around. 2 trips to Europe is difficult, especially when you gave yourself like a 2.5 day turnaround in between the two back stateside. I don't really understand why he did that or why his staff did that. But I think using that as a rationale for the poor performance after already speaking of the cold and the over-prepared response that a lot of leading Democrats led with, I think the American voter is, by and large, I know I am, more cynical than ever and doesn't want to hear the excuses. They want to know that their options in November are 2 viable options for them to choose from. The differences are stark, and you're hearing plenty of that with these appearances. Again, we were listening to audio from the Politically Georgia podcast yesterday. My Congresswoman, Representative Nikema Williams, was on, giving us all the reasons why we have to not elect. We have to ensure that Donald Trump isn't elected back to president, to the office of the president. Understood. We're all on the same page there. The majority of the American public, I believe, is on that same page. It's the fitness of the person currently in the office and atop the Democratic Party ticket. As she puts it, binary options are there before us. I think a majority, in fact, polling shows a majority of not only Americans, but Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents believe someone else atop the Democratic Party ticket would be better for that other option. Okay, so as we left the conversation on the Politically Georgia podcast yesterday with Representative Williams, the Carolyn Bourdeaux op-ed came up.
And this is a quote. Biden does not have the mental or physical stamina for 4 more years of one of the most demanding jobs on earth. It's no one's fault, and it's not fair, but life isn't fair, and the best path forward is an intentional and organized process to select another Democratic nominee to beat Trump. Congresswoman, that wasn't from a pundit or a donor. That was written by former Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Bourdeaux, your colleague. So when you hear something like that...
Oh, Carolyn.
Well, when you hear something like that, what does it make you think?
I mean, but she had things to say before. She's also the person that said Lucy McBath only won because she was a superstar Black woman or whatever she said. And so I take that with a grain of salt because I also served with Carolyn, who we had trouble getting her on the same page and voting for some of the president's policies. So I mean, you take it for what it is. When people show you who they are, just like Donald Trump, believe them the first time.
Wow. Make no mistake, Carolyn Bourdeaux is an enigmatic and controversial figure. She's also a Democrat who defeated Republican Rich McCormick to win a purple seat. So it stands to reason that Carolyn Bourdeaux is not going to always be in lockstep with the Democratic Party. She has run afoul of African-American voters. She has run afoul of progressive voters, as have a lot of centrist, moderate Democrats. I can think of Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin. Again, if they vote with the president's agenda 90, 94, 95% of the time, that doesn't make them a terrible Democrat. It makes them a Democrat who doesn't always vote in line with the party. And listen, I'm as Bernie as a Bernie guy gets, right? I understand bucking the party sometimes, and that being necessary. That being said, Carolyn Bourdeaux is this sort of voice that I think is the canary in the coal mine, too, telling us where the folks who lie in the middle or close to the middle are thinking. Her op-ed in the AJC, appearing, what day was this? July 1st. The headline, I was there January 6th. Trump is dangerous. That's why Biden must exit. It is deeply irresponsible for Democrats to make voters choose between a candidate who threatens democracy and one who raises serious concerns about fitness. That is the headline. It's written by Carolyn Bourdeaux, appearing in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Many have wrestled with the moment when you have to confront your parents about stepping down or scaling back because of age-related impairment, when you have to take away the car keys or arrange for them to have in-home care. Typically, they protest, and there's always the ambiguity of whether it is really necessary. Democrats are now at that point with President Joe Biden. Many saw the debate and despaired. But then they saw the rally in North Carolina and felt new hope. But the consequences of equivocation and delay in this case are not just a broken hip or a car driven into a ditch. The fate of the nation is on the line, Bourdeaux writes. I see the Democratic leadership in Georgia valiantly trying to make the case that they are riding with Biden, but it just isn't going to work, she writes. Nearly 50 million people watched the debate. Before the debate, about 66% of voters were already seriously concerned about Biden's age. Now, according to CNN poll, 72% are. And by the way, new polling came out that showed, again, 75% of the American public believes that the Democratic ticket would be better served with someone other than Biden on the ticket, and 56% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents. Anyway, back to Bourdeaux's op-ed. The debate wasn't just a one-off bad night. It was explicitly marketed as the moment when voters' fear about Biden would be laid to rest. Obviously, their fears were heightened. Of course, in my mind, former President Donald Trump is most certainly worse than even a highly impaired Biden. I was in the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and there is no doubt in my mind that Trump neither understands nor cares about the laws, norms, and ethics required for a functioning democracy. But it is deeply irresponsible for Democrats to make voters choose between a candidate who threatens the democracy and a candidate who raises serious and well-founded concerns about physical and mental impairment, particularly when they have the very real opportunity to make a change. Further, I know way too many people who are not going to make the same calculation that I will. They will reluctantly, grudgingly pull the lever for Trump. Biden is trailing in some polls. He is underperforming down-ballot candidates in swing states. That suggests the problem is not Democrats in general. The problem is Biden, Carolyn Bourdeaux writes. And that was before the disastrous debate. Biden and his campaign owe his supporters a disciplined way forward. Time is of the essence. The media is loving the, quote, Democrats are panicked message, and Democratic leaders calling people raising legitimate concerns bedwetters is simply not going to cut it. This must be put to rest ASAP. Presumably, the president, if he is capable, can do a series of town halls or tough interviews in the next 2 weeks to reassure voters that he is up to the job. However, that was supposed to be the purpose of Thursday's debate. Alternatively, Democrats should proceed as quickly as possible with a strong plan for a brokered convention. Most Democrats' excuses on this front do not hold water. So far, I've seen the following objections to this path. Number one, Biden won't step down, and it's too late in the process to do this. Number two, if he does step down, then Vice President Kamala Harris will be the nominee, and she can't win. Number three, all the money raised for the campaign is in the name of Biden-Harris and can't be transferred to another candidate. Number four, if Democrats have a brokered convention, they will tear themselves to shreds and or there is no evidence that another candidate can do better than Biden. All of these could be problems, but they certainly don't have to be. First, Biden could choose to step down and release his delegates. Presumably, if a broad delegation of Democratic leaders firmly tell him this is necessary, I can't imagine he wouldn't. There is still time to organize a brokered convention, but within a few weeks, it will indeed be too late. Second, let the vice president make her case. We've all seen public opinions change, but there is no reason to limit the choice to only her, Bordeaux writes. Having seen the profound pragmatism of the black leaders like Jim Clyburn in nominating Biden, I don't think the party will implode if Harris doesn't get the nomination. More on Jim Clyburn and his thoughts on that. Actually, let's play that audio for you right now from his appearance with Andrea Mitchell on NBC News earlier this week.
Congressman, how would you feel if there is a decision for him to step down, if he decides that, and he has to decide that? Or if the party pressures him to do that? How would you feel if they worked around and tried to go around Kamala Harris because of her lack of high poll numbers and popularity and broadly based? Do you think it's hers to have if it is not his?
I will support her if he were to step aside. But I want to support her going forward at some time in the future. I want this ticket to continue to be Biden-Harris. And then we'll see what happens after the next election. No, this party should not in any way do anything to work around Ms. Harris. We should do everything we can to bolster her, whether it's in second place or at the top of the ticket.
I'm only inferring here, but it sounds to me like Jim Clyburn believes that if Joe Biden steps down, Kamala Harris should be next in line and that he would support her in doing so. Back to Carolyn Bordeaux's op-ed. She writes, third, having seen how the money flows in campaigns behind the scene, I'm certain there are ways to shift money around to be useful to whoever the nominee is. Again, she's not an FEC person. I'm not an FEC person. I'm unsure. She finishes, finally, a brokered convention is risky, absolutely, and it will require strong leadership. But at this point, the risk of the convention is less than the risk of continuing with Biden. Highly competent leaders in the party can broker this, not the least of which is Biden's own team. And it is not hard to imagine that new nominee would create a wave of energy and relief in an electorate that clearly does not want the options it now has on the ballot. She's not wrong there. Overall, Biden has done a good job. His term has been successful. He has passed good legislation. As a nation, we are building the new economy of the 21st century. But those who have cared for loved ones know what we saw in Atlanta Thursday night. Biden does not have the mental or physical stamina, Bordeaux writes, for 4 more years of one of the most demanding jobs on earth. It's no one's fault, and it's not fair. But life isn't fair, and the best path forward is an intentional and organized process to select another Democratic nominee to beat Trump. Back to Representative Nikema Williams' appearance on the Politically Georgia podcast yesterday. I think she unintentionally pointed out the problem that exists with this conversation that's being had about Joe Biden and his fitness to serve, and how many in the Democratic Party have, in my opinion, sort of ignored this as it being a problem. And actually, I think it's unintentional that Republicans have actually been trying to let us see the her video to sort of convince, I don't know, them, they're already convinced, independent voters, Democrats, that maybe Joe Biden isn't mentally fit for the job anymore. The problem with all of this being, we're not discussing the accomplishments of the first term of the Joe Biden presidency, or maybe possibly it being the only term, and that Democrats are having to field these questions instead of talking about the accomplishments, convincing the American voters that the economy is on not only strong footing, but still on a proper trajectory, that inflation is getting lower, that Donald Trump and Project 2025 are very real and viable threats, that we have an illegitimate Supreme Court continuing to infringe on individual liberties and rights, and that the American people need to rally behind a party that's willing to fight to restore them.
We have to remind voters of the work that we've done because Democrats have delivered, and we're going to continue to do so.
So this is where podcast moderator Bill Nigut points out that even having this conversation and sort of ignoring what we all saw is part of the problem for the party's message going into November.
So, Congresswoman, you've made it clear that you are standing by Joe Biden, and you've very, very aggressively argued why you want him to be the president for 4 more years, and part of it, of course, is because of how you feel about Donald Trump. But this very conversation suggests, I think, one of the problems that Democrats face moving forward. Donald Trump's performance in that debate Thursday night showed us who he is without any question. He's a bully. He's a narcissist. He has take credit for things that he didn't, as you point out, accomplish, lied continually throughout the debate. Under most circumstances, it would have been his performance that probably would have been the headlines the day after the debate. Unfortunately, it was because Biden performed so poorly that you now have to defend him on this show.
Right.
So here's the more important.
But Bill, I would have had to do that anyway because he's
not
always
in the
been
same
counted
way.
out.
Not
Bill,
in
the
the
last
same
time I
way.
was on this show, y'all told me that Biden is old. It's like both of these men are old. So why are we just talking about Biden? So every time I'm having to defend my president, but I'm ready to do it.
Congresswoman, I want to give you a chance to say something about the future. What does Joe Biden have to do next to return to a position of strength in the upcoming election? He's got to take some steps. What should they be?
When the president stepped in front of the camera last night to address what the disastrous decision by the Supreme Court and this absolute immunity for a president, that was presidential. We have to continue to be presidential, to lead in these moments of crisis in our country. When the president stepped on that rally stage in Raleigh, North Carolina, after he left the debate stage, came to my watch party with the Democratic Party of Georgia, took a picture, a selfie, a video, called people's families at midnight, then went to the Waffle House in Atlanta, got a little food before he jumped on Air Force One, landed in North Carolina at 2 a.m. and had a conversation, a small rally with people on the ground in Raleigh at 2:00 in the morning. Then he went to bed, got up the next morning and had a very powerful rally in front of people in Raleigh, North Carolina, and made his case to the American people. People like a comeback story. My president did not shine on that debate stage, and it was troublesome. But what he did was what the American story is all about. He got back up and he fought. He fought for this country. He fought for his right to stay in this race, and we're going to stand behind him.
And then last night he told supporters at a fundraiser that he almost fell asleep on the debate stage. That's a problem. Continue to ignore it at the party's and the nation's peril. All right, final few moments of the Ron Show for Wednesday, July 3rd, and there will not be a show tomorrow. Well, I mean, there will be. There'll be something airing. Just don't know what it'll be yet. And I don't know yet about Friday. I think maybe Friday will be a best of as well. So you've heard me talk in the past about how living in a city like Atlanta, I get a little defensive when folks in the suburbs like to talk about how, the city's run down. Republicans do this all the time. President Trump, former president, then President Trump, talked about Congressman Lewis's district, the one that I live in, being run down, and how white flight in the 20th century took a lot of the tax base out of the city, leaving a huge footprint and infrastructure that needed to be dealt with, but with a suppressed economy that was, again, eviscerated by the abandonment of mostly white citizenry for the suburbs when school integration came to be. The city of Atlanta may have a solution for bringing some of that money back into the city. This from WSB TV last night.
Atlanta could soon become the latest city to impose a blight tax on absentee property owners.
Yes.
Mayor Andre Dickens and council member Byron Amos introduced that legislation. Their proposal would allow municipal courts to increase property tax bills by 25 times the current rate. For larger scale properties, the owner would have to agree to a detailed redevelopment plan. Supporters say the blight tax would not be used for occupied properties.
Now, let me first say that I'm not so naive to think that most of the folks who own blighted properties don't already live in the city of Atlanta. And in fact, that may actually be the case in a large percentage, a plurality. I don't think a majority. And again, it's all anecdotal. But understand that I work in real estate. I'm a residential real estate agent, a realtor. And when you see blighted properties go up for sale, by and large, they're owned by an LLC or someone who doesn't live in the city of Atlanta. That's just anecdotal. More often than not, when I look at the tax records, I see that the owner of that blighted property does not even live in the city of Atlanta or is a faceless LLC of some sort, which could be just a tax shield by the family of the deceased who owns it, or sometimes you see the trust of blah 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 blah. But that's not usually the case when it comes to the trust or the family of the decedent. This is, I think, a program that is long overdue. In fact, I'm kind of stunned that the city doesn't already do it. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the measure would amend the city's tax laws and build upon state and national efforts to incentivize owners to remediate or redevelop neglected properties. Among other things, a property could be deemed blighted if it is, quote, uninhabitable, unsafe, and abandoned structure, or it lacks, quote, ventilation, light, air, or sanitation, the ordinance states. It would not lead to the involuntary displacement of residents living in blighted homes, according to the mayor's office. Owners will be given an opportunity to remediate and redevelop properties if an inspection designates them as blighted. If the property is returned to, quote, productive use, owners could get a discounted tax rate, according to officials. Properties with a larger footprint must first agree to a detailed redevelopment plan aligned with a neighborhood's priorities for connectivity, transportation, and public amenities, according to the mayor's office. Owners can also request a hearing before a municipal court judge within 30 days of receiving notice that the property is blighted or remediation was inadequate. That again, reporting by Matt Reynolds at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. There are remedies for folks who own properties that, again, maybe grandma passed and they don't want to live in the house. They don't know what to do with it. They don't find it to be inhabitable for themselves or anyone, and they don't know what to do with it. And they don't want to sell it to the, quick, low bid. I'll buy it, flip it, make the money off of it. They want to make the money off of it themselves, but they don't have the capital, the cash, the means to do so. And as a residential real estate agent, I happen to know that there are options to actually get that done. So I guess what I'm saying is if you or someone you know owns a blighted property in a city like Atlanta and you don't know what to do, specifically Atlanta, I can address. I know this for a fact. There are companies that will look at your situation, like say you own a piece of property and the property alone is worth $200,000, even with decrepit structure on it or no structure at all. They look at your equity situation. If it's fully paid for, it's fully owned, that's $200,000 that you're just sitting on, and you're thinking, well, I want to wait until the values increase. They can take that equity situation and help you refurbish whatever properties, buildings on the property, residential home, and refurbish it to a point where you actually can get that higher return instead of selling to an eager flipper who will do that work themselves, throwing $60,000, $80,000 into it to make $150,000 more on top of it. There are local and there are national companies that will work with you without you having to expend a dime before the property or the home, refurbished home, is sold. By the way, I'm happy to help anybody out with that. Obviously, as a residential real estate agent, I have those connections, and of course, that is part of what I do for a living. I'm listing a home today in Grayson. Got a condo in Virginia Highlands, Ponce Highlands area on Ponce that I'm going to be listing later today. So it's obviously something that I do aside from podcasting 5 days a week on the America One Radio app and AmericaOneRadio.com. So that is something that I know a lot about. Anyway, I'm really encouraged because this is something that a city needs to do in order to help its neighborhoods continue to revitalize. Dare I say the G word, gentrify, and to help restore a city's viability in areas where maybe there is a belief amongst those who either live in it or have abandoned those properties. They're in unviable areas. And when it comes to, again, the gentrification, bringing property taxes up for folks who have lived in communities long-term or whatever, again, I would say if this is something that is indeed an issue that someone, grandma, grandpa living in a home long-term and feel sort of trapped in it and don't want to continue to be swallowed up by those continuing rising property taxes because of the advancement of properties around it. Again, if it's about refurbishing and cashing out with more money in the pocket to go retire and live a healthy, comfortable life somewhere else in retirement, again, those same companies exist to help do the refurbishment without any money coming out of pocket until the home is sold. Ron at rononthereal.com is my email address. At rononthereal, rononthereal.com. By the way, if you have any more questions you want to ask about that. It's going to do it for today's Ron Show, and I think for the week. Enjoy the 4th. Okay, let's try and celebrate our independence while we still have it. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. Replay 5 to 6 p.m. on the American One Radio app and on demand at progressivevoices.com all day today. Have a good one.